We're going to talk about truly one of my favourite books, certainly of the year, possibly of the decade. I'm going to go that far. I gobbled this book up in about 4 sittings. It is glorious, and it is about an achievement in English cricket that has come under the spotlight a lot lately because with Bazball, the likes of Harry Brook and Johnny Bairstow, especially back in 2022, got very close to surpassing the great Gilbert Jessop. Here is the book, Chasing Jessop. Gilbert Jessop, I'm sure you all know, and if you don't, you should be ashamed of yourselves. The Croucher from Gloucestershire is the holder of the fastest 100 in English Test match history. But, and it's a big but, ladies and gentlemen, no one really knows how fast it was. We've got an idea of how long it was, but we don't even really know how long it was in terms of minutes. We've always assumed that it was 76 balls. That's been the number, the magic number that Harry Brook and Johnny Bairstow and the like have been attempting on occasion to surpass. But this man here, Simon Wilde, insanely enough, has spent, I don't know how long, we'll find out in a minute, has spent yonks trying to recreate this innings. And if that sounds dry and ascetic, it really isn't, because that part of the book comes towards the back end. The start of the book contextualises the England in which we are living in 1902 when all this happens. And it's a brilliant way of getting us in to the story of Jessop, Simon. So just give us a little overview. In 1902, where are we in the series? It's England against Australia for the Ashes. Where are we in that series? What are the types of players that are playing? And where is England's cricketing fortunes at this stage?
Well, thanks for that introduction, Dan. England were at a low ebb. They'd just lost the 4th successive Ashes series. May sound familiar. England struggling against Australia. They'd gone 2-0 down in the previous match at Old Trafford, where they'd lost by 3 runs. Heartbreaking defeat. They should have won that match.
Famous game. Fred Tate.
Exactly.
What was he doing in the team? It's very much the selectors putting people in and then taking them out again.
The selectors had a horrible series. They made a lot of mistakes. They dropped Jessop for that game, and George Hurst, who was the great Yorkshire all-rounder. They messed up, England messed up, and they lost the series. Well, they went 2-0 down, and so England came to the Oval desperate to even just get a consolation win, really. The previous series in England, 1899, England hadn't won a match. They'd lost that one as well. So things were pretty serious. The selectors realised they'd made a mistake, brought Hurst back, brought Jessop back, and they picked probably one of England's strongest teams. They got it right at the end.
These selectors at this stage, we've moved on, have we, from the kind of absurdity of the club, like Lancashire picking the side when you were at Old Trafford, and the MCC, I guess, picking the side at Lords, would they have done, I guess?
Yes. In 1890, so the previous series, 1899, by that point they'd got in a panel of selectors who were like full-time people, and Lord Hawke, who was they were basically county captains, the selectors. Lord Hawke was the Yorkshire captain, and he was the chairman of the panel, and a couple of other people. Well, W.G. Grace had been on it; he dropped off. But there's a lot of parochialism still. Did Hawke want to pick the Yorkshire players and weaken his own county? That sort of stuff. So it was still very complicated.
Because that still counted for so much, didn't it? I mean, you get certainly stories in the 1890s where teams just don't want to release their players. The county championship is in many ways more significant than a test match.
Or release them for a tour. So Hawke wouldn't release Hurst and Rhodes, 2 great all-rounders, for a tour of Australia because he wanted them to be rested for the next county season. I mean, it sounds absurd now, but that's how it was then. But yeah, so England were in a desperate plight, really. They were feeling sorry for themselves, and they needed a win, really, to boost morale.
And you didn't really gather the notion of dead rubbers, did you? I mean, in the book, what comes through loud and clear is that you may be thinking, well, surely if England have already lost the series, how desperate is it? But actually, the England you describe at this point, each game is a standalone moment.
Yeah, and a sort of measure of national pride and status. And also, I think, to give it a bit more context, we'd had the Boer War had been going on for several years. There'd just been a peace treaty in May of 1902, so only a few weeks before this match. So there was a sort of jingoistic mood in the country. And in fact, a large element of the crowd were Australian troops who'd come over to Britain for come back from South Africa and had come over for the coronation of Edward VII. Queen Victoria died in 1901. There'd been a delayed coronation. It happened 2 days before the Oval Test match. So on the Saturday, just over in Westminster Abbey, there was the coronation of Edward VII, and then on the Monday, this Test match starts. And so the crowd involved, so the Australian Prime Minister, Edward Barton, sorry, he was watching. A lot of Australian troops were here. So there was a sort of like a, it was a proper international event in some ways because of the coronation.
And another part of this context that you bring out so well is the Britain, or England, Britain, Europe of the time, which is technologically advancing massively quickly. And that technology, you've got moving pictures to a degree, but you've also got technology that allows newspapers to print vast quantities at various different times of the day. So you can, like, evening newspapers are really significant at this time, aren't they? Being able to get news of the match as it's going on. You've got telegraphs, you've got all sorts that were not there probably, 10 years before, would it be? How recent is this technology?
I think the telegraph system had sort of started in the 1860s, but it was improving all the time. In fact, by 1902, telephones were starting to come in, but I think there'd been a vote amongst the journalists in the Oval Press Box, and they said, we don't want telephones in the press box, it's going to disturb us, so can we not have them, please?
Precious bunch, aren't they, the scribblers?
Still are, obviously. The telegraph system was an amazing thing, like the internet has been for us. It transformed everything, and I think newspapers saw something like a cricket match, ongoing event, live event, as a way of showing off how up to date they could be. And a lot of the papers I looked at would have on the front page, would have a cricket edition sort of stamped in the top right corner, to sort of, say sort of 7 p.m. edition or 6 p.m. edition, whatever, to show how current they were. And not many things were happening in the country that were necessarily rolling news, if you like, but the Test match, or county matches even, was one. And the stop press would often have cricket scores or even racing results. Those sort of things were a way of the newspapers showing how up to date.
I mean, this continued, didn't it, well into the 70s and 80s. I used to get my Evening Standard when I came out of school on a Test match day to try to get the latest score, get the T score, and it would be on the back of the Evening Standard the wrong way round. Yes. That was the only reason I got the paper, just to check that. I don't know why I bothered paying for it, really. Or you'd ring up the actual pavilion to try to get the score.
Yes.
Now, another part of this is speed, and we've touched on it there with the telegraph, but you've also got innovations in trains. People are getting around the country a lot quicker. It's a techie world, isn't it, in which people are being sort of wowed by these new inventions. You've probably not got aeroplanes exactly yet, but you've got...
Well, the Wright brothers was 1903, I think, perhaps, so it was coming. There's a quote which I put in the book from a Frenchman whose name I can't remember now, but Charles Pégut, I think. But he said the world had changed. He was writing in 1909. He said the world has changed more in the last 30 years than it has in all the time since Jesus Christ. So basically, 1880 to 1910, there's a lot of stuff happening, and the world was getting faster. Trains were going at a mile a minute. That was a big story in the papers in 1902. There was you could drive a car at 100 miles an hour. Again, sensational development sort of thing. And the telegraph system was another manifestation of speed, really. But I think also, so the Jessop innings, being fast, was also celebrated as another example of man being able to go faster than before. And a lot of, like, the Olympic Games had started in 1896, same thing, going faster, further, jumping further, etc. So Jessop sort of tapped into all that sort of mood of things being more extraordinary than they had been. And I think there was an element of them, certainly the journalists, exaggerating the time that he took to get to his 100. It was given as 75 minutes. It's still in Wisden, I think, as 75 minutes. I sort of reconstructed the whole innings, and I reckon it was actually 80 minutes. It's a bit slower than that. But I think they rounded things down to the nearest 5 minutes.
Right.
And I think they were quite keen to say, gosh, this is fast,
So
you can't get away with that now, obviously.
No, quite rightly too. So let's we've got the match in its context. England can't win the Ashes. They're desperate for a win. We've got Gilbert Jessop we've now got to contextualise, because this is a guy whose name has come down through history and is associated with this innings first and foremost. But this is not an isolated incident of him being an absurdly rapid batter. And at this time, and we kind of think, don't we, about this, well, I suppose you may or may not think, but this golden age, this crossing over between the centuries and this Edwardian era. There's a time of flamboyant batters, the likes of Victor Trumper from Australia, Jessop himself, Fry, Ranji. But actually, it's not everybody is going berserk and trying to hit the ball incredibly hard, incredibly quickly. Jessop is still a bit of an outlier, isn't he? And that's partly why he's in and out of the team, because it's an untrustworthy way of playing, isn't it? Actually trying to entertain.
Yeah. Well, this taps in again nicely with the sort of baseball thing where McCullum and Stokes back people like, say, Zach Crawley, because they feel that he can take the attack to the opposition, and even if he doesn't come off very often, if he does, he can help win the match. And they're like that. Well, Jessop was that sort of player. He wasn't going to. He's not. McCullum said about Crawley. He's not a consistent type of player, but we still value him. Well, Jessop wasn't a consistent player, but he could still play an explosive innings that could change the match.
He's an impact player.
And so if he'd been playing today, he's exactly the sort of player they would have stuck by, because he would have had an impact. I mean, he might have been a bit racy for McCullum, actually, Jessop.
Really?
He really was a maniac. But in those days, the selectors mistrusted him, and they weren't quite sure. So he started out as a fast bowler. When he was young, he was a very fast, aggressive, sort of a lot of bouncers and things like that. He bowled very fast, but his back sort of went in the end. And so by 1902...
Oh, the old stress fractures, even then, we think.
Yes, stress fractures. So by 1902, he was really a batsman who bowled a bit, and I think that's why England were unsure whether they could pick him, because they weren't sure if what they were getting. Was he a batsman who bowled or a bowler who batted? And that sort of changed throughout his career. So
that's a familiar problem, isn't it?
I mean, he only played 18 times for England, and he was in and out a lot. And this innings was really in this test in 1902 was the sort of highlight. He did play another amazing innings against South Africa in 1907, the first test South Africa played in England at Lord's, and he got 93 off what we know is 64 balls. Well, had he stayed in, he would have beaten his own record for sure.
Yeah,
he would have broken the 70 ball mark, I think.
Well, he was an amateur as well, wasn't he? So it's quite unusual that there was a lack of trust in him, because the amateurs all stuck together in those days. And if you were an amateur, you were seen as the right sort of chap.
Yeah.
But he wasn't your usual amateur, was he?
No.
Because he wasn't from a particularly wealthy background. No. Was his father a doctor, was he?
Yeah, in Cheltenham, yeah. And he didn't go to... He went to Cheltenham Grammar School. Well, there was in the social hierarchy, there's private schools and there's grammar schools, and so he was not from the top drawer. That stuff mattered. And also... I mean, his background was interesting because he went to Cheltenham Grammar School because his father was a governor, I think. But his father died when he was... Gilbert was about 13 or 14, that sort of age. So Gilbert had to leave the school, and so his education stopped, and he only managed to sort of continue it by being an assistant teacher at some other schools around Oxfordshire and places. I mean, he moved around the country, in fact. Continues his education. Eventually he got himself to Cambridge, where he wanted to go and ultimately go into the church. That didn't ever happen. Too racy, but absolutely. But as a result of that, he didn't have an orthodox cricketing education. So had he gone to Harrow, like F.S. Jackson, who he shared a partnership of 100 with in this match, he'd have been coached properly, and he would have looked like an orthodox batsman in those days, classically, tutored or whatever. He was a free spirit, and he basically played a bit like a child would, where you'd bowl as fast as you can, you'd throw yourself around in the field like a maniac, and you'd try and hit the ball as far as you can. And he was a great fielder as well, wasn't he? He was the best fielder in the country, yeah, without a doubt. He was amazing. So he had this sort of unfettered style of doing everything, but had he gone to in fact, he said this, had he gone to a sort of a proper school, he would never have played the way he did. But he was a free spirit, really, and he just saw the ball and tried to hit it as far as he could. That was sort of his approach, and he quite quickly realised that actually it worked in a way. He was inconsistent, but when it came off, he scored over 50 first-class hundreds in an era when that was a lot. So he's kind of a folk hero, because people are going to matches, and when he's playing, they're on the edge of their seats, they're excited for what can happen. But when we come back to 1902, he's just come back from a tour in Australia, 01-02, where he didn't have a lot of success. And the Australians felt that they got his number, that, they know how to handle this, like they do with baseball, don't they? They think, we know how to... They put a lot of guys on the rope, and he'd hold out, that's what... that happened.
And unfortunately, he would fall for this. And in those days, in much the same way as we got infuriated when Jamie Smith got caught the ball before a new ball against India and things like that, then lots of sanctimonious preaching takes place. But fundamentally, he's the person that the crowd all want to come and see. So that's Jessop. We've set him up for you. We've set up the match. The match itself, and the part of the reason why this game is so extraordinary and why this innings is so well remembered, not just the speed. If the game hadn't been a lost cause, if England hadn't won it from a seemingly impossible position, it would probably just have been a very fast 100 and losing cause that people would have remembered as great fun, but that would have been about it. It would be people like Andrew Sampson who would go on about it only. But instead, the whole book is written about it because it is one of those absurd comebacks, isn't it? It's like Headingley 81, it's like Headingley 2019. Paint us the picture, and just a reminder, in those days, we are living in uncovered wickets, so things could go horribly wrong very quickly. It's
a 3-day match for a start. Uncovered pitches. The reason they could get a result in 3 days was because the pitches were uncovered. If you had a bit of rain, the surface would become, I mean, it's hard to imagine now, but the surface would become tacky, particularly if the sun came out. So a hot sun on a wet pitch, it becomes sticky, and the bowlers could cut the ball and spin it, and it'd be like a sort of the equivalent of a dust bowl in India. It would just, the ball would deviate all over the place.
Uneven bounce as well.
Bounce, very difficult. And there were you would pick a team that would include specialist batsmen who could play on a sticky pitch, like Johnny Tildesley played in the England team specifically because he was very good on those sort of pitches.
He was from Manchester, so it was forever raining there.
The Northerners knew how to play when it rained, and they'd always have maybe a brisk spin bowler, sort of Wilfred Rhodes type figure who could make the ball spin and cut and bite on the. So you always had to pick a team with that in mind. And that's exactly what happened. Australia batted first, weather good, they ground out a score of 320. We got through many more overs per day as well, that's the thing. So this match had 310 overs in it over the 3 days. So you're getting...
Are they 6-ball overs?
6-ball overs. Yeah. You're getting 100 overs a day. Clearly you don't do that now, but many Bazball test matches are finished in 310 overs. So it's like a modern test match. It's just spread over 3 days.
Spread over 3, yeah.
So Australia get what is a big score, really, 320 on a decent pitch. It then rains, of course, as it was bound to do. Rains on the first evening. So when England then bat on day 2, the pitch is tricky, and they're really struggling. They're 80 odd for 6. Jessop's 6th out, 83 for 6. It looks like they're going to have failed to have saved the follow-on, which is 150 behind. So that's about 170 something. But Clem Hill drops an important catch, and England managed to creep past the follow-on. So then Australia have to go into bat. The pitch is still difficult, and England, great job, they skittle out Australia for 120. So
let's bring...
Jessop runs out trumper, by the way, with a brilliant throw. So that is a key part of it.
Let's bring Samo in at this point then. So when are England batting in this match? Are they batting on the second morning by then?
Well, the first innings or
in their first innings, yeah.
Yeah.
So they're coming in the second morning. So we've had overnight rain, and this is the overnight rain that was probably what Jessop was talking about in his hotel room, because we have a little anecdote, don't we,
about a bet,
about a bet, and they're looking out the window and going, well, that's us done. We're toast.
Yeah, who can possibly even score 50 on this? And they have a bet about it, and then he says, what about if one of us gets 100? And they took a bet, and obviously he ended up winning this bet.
So that sort of 7th, 8th wicket partnership, that revival, is what gets England to a point where they don't have to bat again immediately
on the pitch that's still difficult.
So Australia have to go out to bat, and what is the lead they've got there, Andrew? Is it about 140?
The lead is 141. And Australia, England started their second innings. Australia was still batting though, down at the close of the second.
Yeah, so 18 wickets fell on day 2. Australia 114 for 8 or something like that.
114 for 8.
So on the final day, England get the last 2 wickets quite quickly, so the target becomes 263.
Yep.
And the pitch is still difficult, but it's they sort of various accounts say that it does ease as the day goes on, so maybe things get a little bit easier. But England lose 5 wickets before lunch for 48. So they're when Jessop walks out, 48 for 5, 20 minutes before lunch.
They're toast, aren't they?
The game looks done, really.
And let's not forget they've got Trimble, Trumbull, who is a petrifying prospect. He is best bowler in the world at the time.
Yeah, and he took more wickets in Ashes tests than anyone right through to Dennis Lillee in the 1980s. He was a phenomenal bowler, tall, could cut the ball on these sort of pitches we're talking about. He was a very he could bowl in all conditions, is what I'm trying to say. Highly skillful, and the height was a problem. And Jessop had got out to him a few times in the series, and he decided in this innings that he was going to not play cross-batted shots because it was too risky because of the bounce would vary. So he hit him straight. In fact, he ended up hitting him in the pavilion. But he didn't play cross-batted shots to Trumbull. He only did it against Saunders, who was the left-arm spinner. And that was a sort of crucial tactical change for him in that innings.
So he's a thinking batter here. I mean, these are quite 21st century tactics, aren't they? And just to put it into context for you, what the Oval was like at this point. So you've got Trumbull bowling from the pavilion end, and you've got Saunders, the left-armer, bowling from the Vauxhall end. And the reason why this is significant is because the Oval that you see today has similarities with the Oval of 1902, but some fundamental differences. One of which is that the playing area in those days was much, much bigger. So where we are now in the media centre, this would probably even still have been part of the playing area, I reckon, from when I was a kid, because there's a bit of a concourse behind us as well. So you've got this massively long boundary at one end towards the Vauxhall end. The pavilion end is altogether shorter. It's not an inconsiderable hit.
Not dissimilar to what it is now.
But exactly, not dissimilar, because the pavilion is also not dissimilar.
And was built just before the match. So that it's not moved position, I don't think.
Right.
It might have gone up, but it's not gone.
It's not gone forward.
No,
it's gone up.
It's where it was.
So Jessop's got to take a view on this. He's coming at 48 for 5. England still need 213 or so to win. Is that right?
215, yeah.
215 to win.
That's quite similar, just to divert, that is a very similar match position to when Ben Stokes walked out at Headingley in 2019. The only other time England have beaten Australia by 1 wicket in England, as happens in both these games. Very similar situation, although I think England were 3 down rather than 5 down. But they needed about 215. Similar, but Stokes' pitch in 2019, much easier.
Yes, the Headingley pitch and also the outfield much quicker.
Correct.
Because you do mention, get this, there's an all-run 5 in this match as the ball is hit towards the Harleyford Road side.
He cuts it down to the Vauxhall and where we are now. Yeah, into that corner, I can remember from my early days watching it, that corner particularly was very long. And you could, I think there were all run 7s and things down there sometimes. I can't imagine really, but there were some ludicrous situations down there because it was so long. You couldn't put a man on the rope for it. It's too far away.
And the other thing you need to bear in mind, because this will become important later, is that there are no 6s to speak of. To get a 6, you've got to hit it out of the ground, which, given that the Oval's the largest playing area in the country by some considerable margin, it's not going to happen. So you can hit it into the pavilion as many times as you like, but you're still only getting 4 for it, which does sort of beg the question, what's the tactical advantage to going aerial, except I suppose you get it over the fielders.
Correct.
But you don't get any more runs for it. So he's coming at 48 for 5, and then he starts this partnership. And it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's with Jackson. And these are people who are very, very different in their approach both to life and to cricket. And there's even a sort of suggestion that Jackson is kind of block on his selection at various points and has no real faith or trust in the Jessop method. Is that fair?
Yeah, so Jackson was... what they did... we talked about the selection panel earlier. They would co-opt a couple of senior amateur players who were in the team and were going to be in the team onto the selection panel. So Stanley Jackson was one of the selectors earlier in the series, and he would have been party to the decision to leave Jessop out for the previous match in Manchester. And when Jackson subsequently became England captain in 1905, the next time Australia came here, Jessop played in the first match, got out for naught, and never played again. And it's widely described of Jackson that he didn't want him in the team. He didn't trust him, even despite this great 100 in 1902. He still thought he was too unreliable.
And did he perhaps in the end, might he have been a bit jealous of the brouhaha around it?
Well, possibly,
because his innings is absolutely vital. And yet we don't really talk about him. In this game we talk about Hurst and Rhodes, that we will come on to very shortly, because they're a large part of the story, and Jessop. And yet that partnership is the one that transforms England's fates, isn't it? From 48 for 5 to when the 6th wicket falls, how many do they put on, and in what time?
They put on 109, of which Jessop scores 83. I think there are maybe 8 extras, so what is that, 90? So Jackson would add 18 in the time that Jessop's scoring 83. I think, to his credit, Jackson thought, this guy is going great guns. All I need to do is stay in, so I'm going to block. I'm not going to take any risks. And so, in that sense, it was sensible. But he didn't really approve of Jessop at all. But
how long does that take? Because in the book, you do brilliantly. You break it down into various hours of play, actually, at some points. So we've got this section when he comes in just before lunch, and then we've got the fireworks after lunch, and all this is significant. So the transformation of England's fortunes happens almost in the blink of an eye in Test match terms, in front of a very full, very engaged Oval crowd.
Well, Jessop comes in what I calculate to be maybe 22 minutes before lunch. He scores 29 by the lunch break. And he attacks from the very start. He's almost out first ball. He almost drags it on first ball, but doesn't. He hits Trumbull into the pavilion once, but he's also, when he's facing Saunders from the far end looking down here, he's dropped by Victor. The only proper chance he gives, he's dropped by Victor Trumper as like a low skimming drive that Trumper runs in, dives forward to try and catch it, can't quite get there. He's on about 27 at that time. And there's also talk about a stumping chance, although I think it was probably quite hard. That he was in the 20s both those times. They're the only 2 mistakes, really. Apart from that, it's pretty pure stuff. So even by lunch, there's quite a few eyewitnesses describe the mood in the ground. And they say by lunch, already the people are getting excited, thinking, wow, as long as these 2 are still in, we could still win this game. In fact, some of the eyewitnesses, there's Ben Travers, famous playwright. He wrote about it very well. He was the first man to appear on Test Match Special when they did the sort of chat at lunchtime.
Was he?
He was the first guest, 1980, and he spoke about the Jessop match.
Wow.
And P.G. Woodhouse, who I think you've probably heard of, he was working at a bank, Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank in London, came over during his lunch break and saw the start of the partnership around the lunchtime period, but had to go back to the office, very annoyed about that.
Well, you would be.
So these
livid.
people described what was happening, and quite a few people left at lunchtime. They still thought the game was done. They thought England were going to lose 5 down, but other people came into the ground, so they reckoned that the crowd actually was bigger by the afternoon session than it had been before, because this phenomenon of people finding out that Jessop is batting often drew people to come race down to the ground.
And that's taking us back to the newspaper story we were talking about earlier, that suddenly new word can get out.
Yeah,
and so there's a stampede to get in. People have come to watch, and after lunch, this is where things go absolutely berserk.
Yeah. So Jessop goes from 29 right through to 104 in an hour after lunch. So he's getting sort of 75 runs. Jackson gets out just after 3 o'clock, 45 minutes after lunch, but then George Hurst comes in and he starts bright. He hits a couple of early boundaries, and he will take, after Jessop is out, he will carry on right through to the end. But yeah, there was one over. I mean, we're sort of spoilt now. We see so many big overs where the bowler gets absolutely mauled. But there was an over where he hit Saunders for 4 fours in a row, all to square leg sort of area, and the crowd just went crazy. They thought this was amazing. He went from sort of something in the 50s to the 54 to 71 in that over, I think 17, and there's some good descriptions of how the crowd were throwing their top hats in the air. It sounds sort of cliche, doesn't it? But they were generally throwing their top hats in the air, or their boaters, or whatever. So yeah, the crowd went crazy, which in those days I think they were far more restrained than we would be today. But there was genuine delirium going on, and
and is that unusual?
When he got to his 100, yeah, I think very much so. And I think it wouldn't have been the same had it been at Lord's.
Nothing's the same at Lord's.
No, I mean they're far more straight-laced, buttoned up, aren't they?
Yes.
So they would never have done that. But at the end of the game, when England win, there's a pitch invasion, which again I don't think would have happened at Lord's. And they all gathered in front of the pavilion and chanted for Hurst and Jessop to come out and be saluted. It was raining by then, by the way. It rained just after the end.
So he had to get on with it, or else it would have been. If it managed to stay in, that England wouldn't have won. They would have been able to draw it.
That is the thing that's not sort of. I suspect that was part of his thinking, but I don't know that anyone now actually sort of articulated it properly. But I think he would have known that if they didn't get on with it, it was an overcast day and there was sort of rain threatening, that they would have run out of time. And they only just made it. They won just before. In fact, I think it was raining at the end, but they carried on.
So just to finish off on that before we just dig into the very last bit of the chat before the players come back out. Jessop does, unfortunately, get out. And what's the score when he gets out, Andrew?
187 for 7.
187 for 7. So they still need another
76.
76 with only 3 wickets in hand on an awkward pitch, albeit that Trumble's been bowling forever. So at some point, he must have got slightly tired. You never know.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, they brought Warwick Armstrong, who was a leg
The big
spinner,
ship.
big ship, in place of Saunders after Saunders went for 17 and over. Armstrong bowled sort of down the leg side to frustrate Jessop, which worked. He did stifle him. Jessop got some boundaries away off him, but in the end he's caught a short leg off Armstrong, attacking his sort of leg, coming into his leg. So he got it. The ploy worked. No sooner had Armstrong got him out than they took him off, brought back Saunders. They later bowled Monty Noble as well, but Trumbull kept going through for the whole innings from the pavilion end.
Absolutely, it's
Never came
astounding. And what did he? How many overs did he bowl at the end there, Andrew, in this innings?
33.5.
Unbroken,
Unchanged, yeah.
unchanged.
Yeah, I mean,
33
they
overs.
had the lunch break, but that was it. Yeah.
So the reason why I remember Hurst and Rhodes, there are a couple of partnerships for the 8th wicket and the 9th wicket, which are vital.
I mean, Hurst becomes the senior man. He does most of the scoring. There's Bill Lockwood stays with him for a while. He scores 2, but they add 20 odd perhaps. Dick Lilly's the wicketkeeper. He bats quite enterprising. They add another 30 odd. So when Wilfred Rhodes, who's quite a young man, I think, still at that point, comes out to join Hurst, these two Yorkshiremen, both born in the same village in Yorkshire, in Kirkeaton, very different characters. When he comes out to join Hurst, I think they need 15 more.
15,
don't they?
yeah.
And of course, you can tell the apocryphal story. Won't
Well,
you?
we're going to get him in singles, apparently.
Yes, I mean, that was supposedly the conversation. They did have a chat. It's quite clear from the newspaper reports. They did meet. So Hurst went to meet Rhodes as he walked out, and there was a chat. But pretty sure that wasn't really it. It was more a case of maybe, you stay there, I'll sort of get the run, sort of thing. But in fact, Hurst did get them mainly in singles, but there was an overthrow which gave him a 2, and Rhodes, who actually was a little bit lucky, nicked one through the slips for 4. So it wasn't done in singles.
And just to be clear about this, Wilf Rhodes is no ordinary number 11. This is a man who's going to share in a record England opening partnership with Jack Hobbs of 323 in about 10 years' time. Is it 1912 or so?
Yes.
He bats. He's at 11 here, but he's a regular opener for England later on in his career. Took over 4,000 wickets, but scored tens of thousands of runs. So it's quite fortunate in a way that you've got these two together. But England get over the line, and they do it just by 1 wicket. Pandemonium ensues. Crowd goes completely berserk. And then everybody wants a piece of Jessop's innings. And then what I want us to do now is focus in on that press room, because what's so marvellous about this book is that we start from the macro. We start with the need for speed that's going on in the world, the human endeavour trying to go as fast as humanly possible, and we end up basically in that press box over there trying to piece together the truth of this crazy innings, because by the next day every newspaper wants the story, and it wants as long and as full a record as humanly possible, and this is where you come in. So 76 balls is where we started this conversation. You think you have worked out roughly what it actually is.
So I mean, the starting point was that there was very quickly the Jessop family had some scrapbooks which still exist, and when Gerald Brodgib did a biography of Jessop in 1974, centenary of his birth, he used those scrapbooks. In those scrapbooks there's a cutting, but there's no heading, no date, that has a list of the every ball Jessop faced. It turns out it was I found out subsequently it was in the Athletic News, which is a very respectable sports weekly, that had the 76 ball list. I went digging and I found the British Newspaper Archive is now digitalised. It's great because you can search it much faster. I found a newspaper called The Morning Leader, published the next morning. The Athletic News came out 5 days later. The very next morning, the Morning Leader had not only a ball-by-ball list of its own, which had never, no one's ever sort of seen it since, if you like. Not only a ball-by-ball list, but who was bowling each ball. So that's far more sophisticated data than we had before.
Because you don't get that in the scorebook, do you? I mean, this is one thing that's very interesting, and Andrew, you might be able to help out on here. It's scored like you'd score a club game, but nowadays, even in a club game, you'll keep a note of the dot balls that the batters
so
are facing.
Keeping a note of dot balls for each batsman was not done then, and wasn't done really till the 1960s.
Well, I mean,
there was a few people who did.
Yeah, no, Ferguson, of course.
Yeah.
W.H. Ferguson was scoring linear from early days. So
And linear, by linear we mean...
if you looked at Zoltzman's or Frindle's score sheets, it's the kind of linear with
It's each over has a line.
line.
Each over has a line, and it's logged against.
Oh, who wants you?
It's logged against each batsman as well as
Yeah.
each bowler, so
Yeah.
you can trace every ball. So yes, it was.
So we're relying on newspapers then, keeping note.
The scorebooks are missing. We don't have the scorebooks. Even if we had them, it wouldn't necessarily give us the answers. But some enterprising journalists kept a ball-by-ball note of Jessop's innings, probably because he was so devastating that they'd come to remember that this could be, it could be interesting. So I found this new cutting, which was like the eureka moment. That's when I knew I had to sort of dig
what's that?
deeper.
What did that feel like?
Yeah, well, I was quite surprised, I've got to say. But that had so that reckoned he'd got his 100 off 71 balls. The Athletic News list said 76. I basically reconstructed the innings using those two lists and all the newspaper accounts I could lay my hands on, and worked out that it's he scored his 100 between 72 and 74. The reason I can't be precise exactly is because there's a couple of overs where the strike changes hands, and the Athletic News list suggests at one point and the Morning Leader says another. There's no way of knowing which is correct.
And there's no way we'll ever know, do you think?
I don't think so. I don't know.
You've exhausted pretty much every possible
I've
avenue.
exhausted myself. I know. Yes, I don't think there are any more newspapers out there, but you never know.
So now we've got this awful situation where if somebody gets 172 balls, if Harry Brook does it in 72 balls,
there'll be a bit of a fuss.
What are we going to say? Are we going to say he's got the fastest 100 in English history?
If he's done it with the aid of sixes, then Brooks got an advantage over Jessop, hasn't he? Because
right, now tell us this.
You couldn't hit a six.
Yeah. So how many balls?
Time.
So how many balls could it have been?
Jessop hit 3 what we would call sixes into the pavilion off Trumbull. 2 of them before he'd got to his 100, so he would have got there 1 ball fewer.
So his last 4 runs were a 6, were they? In effect, a modern day 6.
Yeah, he would have already been at his 100 by the time
I
he
see.
hit the third one, but the first 2 would have helped him get there faster by 1 ball.
By 1 ball.
So you could argue that he's sort of 71 to 73. So I would say to Harry Brook,
70.
Jamie Smith, if you want the record, get it in 70.
Get it in 70.
Yeah.
Simon, the players are making their way out. I would want to talk to you about this for hours more on end. It is such a fantastic book. It is a rip-roaring read. It is just it's quick. It's fast-paced. We've told you much about the match, but if you read this book, you will get so much more fabulous detail. You'll find out an awful lot more about the great man himself, Gilbert Jessop, the Croucher. And it all took place here. If you're a Surrey fan, it took place here. Reading this book just transformed me back to the Oval of 1902. It's an incredible achievement. Simon, congratulations. Well done.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us.